Say hello to the black face of white supremacy. That's what the LA Times called me when I ran for governor. I kid you not. It was a headline, Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. Subheadline, you've been warned. The other day I was watching The View. Yes, I do that so you don't have to. And Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar were talking about how unusual it is for a black person to be successful. There are exceptions, they said. And I thought about my father. My father was 13 when he left home. And when I say left home, it's probably not the fair way of saying it. He was essentially thrown out of his house by his mother. My dad's mom was illiterate. He was born in the back of a room, as were most blacks in those days, Athens, Georgia, 1915. He knows the year he was born. He does not know the month and the day. So he enrolls in kindergarten. The teacher says, what's your birth date? My dad says, I have no idea. So she wrote down May 25, which was her birthday. So every time May 25 would roll around and we would celebrate my dad's birthday, I would say, Dad, we have a 1 in 365 chance of this being the right day. My dad never knew his biological father. My name, Elder, was a name of a man who was in his life the longest of his mom's series of men she essentially lived off of. And my dad came home at the age of 13. Elder was long gone. Elder, by the way, was an alcoholic who physically abused his mom, and when my dad tried to stop it, he would physically abuse my dad. So my dad comes home at the age of 13. He quarrels with his mom's then-boyfriend. She sides with the boyfriend and throws my father out of the house, never to return. You've heard people say so-and-so is dirt poor, this guy was dirt poor. My dad was dirt poor. The road was dirt. He had no money in his pocket at the age of 13. He was dirt poor. He walked down the street and did anything he could, any kind of job he could. Ultimately, he got a job as a Pullman porter. They were the largest private employers of blacks in those days. So this little black boy from Athens, Georgia, was able to travel all around the country, and he came to this place called California and a city called Los Angeles, and my dad was stunned. You could walk in the front door of a restaurant and get served. My dad always had packages of crackers and tin cans of tuna because you never knew in the South if you'd be able to get a meal. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to Los Angeles where things are better. Pearl Harbor. My dad joins the Marines. We have any Marines here? Semper Fi, bro. I asked my dad why the Marines. You know what I'm going to say. 2 reasons. 1, they go where the action is. 2, I love the uniforms. So my dad was a staff sergeant stationed at Guam. He was in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. The military, of course, was segregated in those days. War is over. My dad goes back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he met and married my mom to get him a job as a cook. My dad can look at a cake and tell you what's in it. So he goes to a restaurant, and he is told, we don't hire niggers. Goes to another restaurant, told the same thing. Another restaurant, told the same thing. He goes to an unemployment office. Lady says, you went through the wrong door. My dad goes to the hall and sees colored only, goes through that door to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad came home to my mom and said, this is nonsense. I'm going to LA. I'm going to get me a job as a cook, and I'll send for you. So he goes to LA. He walks around, and he's told, you don't have any references. My dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs? He offered to work for free just to get a reference. Wouldn't do that. So he's treated the same way in California as he was in Georgia. They were maybe a little more polite about it. He goes to an unemployment office, this time just one door. And the lady says, I have nothing. My dad says, what time do you open? She says, 9. What time do you close? She says, 5. My dad said, I'll be sitting there till you find something. My dad sat in a chair the whole day, came back the next day, sat there for about half the day. She calls him up. She says, I have something. I don't know whether you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it? She says, a job at Nabisco brand bread cleaning toilets. My dad did that for over 10 years. Took a second full-time job with another bread company called Barbara Ann Bread, also cleaning toilets. Cooked for a family on the weekend because he wanted to make additional money so my mother could be a stay-at-home mom. And he went to night school to get his GED, and then later on went to trade school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. So by the time my dad is 47 years old, he starts this little cafe. And when my dad retired, he owned the little property where the cafe was, property next door to it, plus the home that's still in our family. So when my dad retired in his 80s, he had a net worth of around $1 million. Don't tell me my father was an exception. That generation worked hard. That generation believed in America. My father was religious. My father believed in God. My father believed in hard work, accountability, patriotism, entrepreneurship. In 1940, 87% of blacks lived under the poverty line. 20 years later, in 1960, that number had fallen to 47%. That's the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for blacks in American history. And that's before the Civil Rights Act of '64, before Brown versus Board of Education, Jim Crow South. Why? It was rare for a child to be brought into the world without a father and a mother in the home. Today, it is rare for a black child to be brought in the world with a father and a mother in the home. 70% of black kids enter the world today without a father in the home married to the mother. 25% of white kids enter the world today without a father in the home married to the mother. The reason I mentioned 25% is because that was the same percentage as was the case with blacks in 1965. There was a booklet written by a liberal, later on became a senator from New York, named Daniel Patrick Moynihan, called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. And again, 25%, when he wrote that book in 1965, black kids entered the world without a father in the home married to the mother. He thought this was horrific. It's going to have all sorts of negative social problems, and it needed to be addressed. Now 25% of white kids, as I mentioned, now enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. 50% of Hispanic kids, 40% of all American kids today enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. Why? Our welfare state has incentivized women to marry the government and has incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility, and we need to deal with this. These kids need mentors. They need male role models. There are a whole bunch of men who are now retired with plenty of time on their hands, and just as with an alcoholic you have a sponsor, all these kids should have a sponsor, should have somebody that they could pick up the phone with or go online with and have a conversation with when they're getting ready to make a bad decision, when they need motivation, when they need somebody to kick them to keep them going straight. If you don't have somebody in your house to make sure that you've been fed, clothed, housed, educated, to make sure you've done your homework and gone to bed on time, you are in deep, deep trouble. And we need to deal with this. And forget about elder. Barack Obama once said, "A kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail." Speaking of whom, when Obama walked into the Oval Office in January of 2009, he had a 70% approval rating. Think about that. He got elected with a little more than 52% of the vote. How does he walk into the Oval Office before he's done anything at all as president with a 70% approval rating? I'll tell you why. It isn't because all of a sudden people said, you know what, I want my capital gains taxes increased. I want Obamacare. No, they thought at the very least, he will put a fork in the notion that America is systemically racist. And the reason they felt that way, I was in Boston 2004 when Obama gave that speech introducing John Kerry. There's no blue America, there's no red America, there's just one America. There's no black America, there's just one America, yay! He was on 60 Minutes when he was running. He had not yet caught Hillary, but he was coming, and that's why they put him on. And Steve Croft, the correspondent, said, "Senator, if you don't win, will it be because of race?" I'm at home by myself. I said, let's see how this man answers this question. Is he going to give a victocrat answer the way Jesse Jackson would or Al Sharpton would? Or is he going to tell the truth? He told the truth. He said, no. If I don't win, it will be because I have not articulated a vision that the American people can embrace. I said, hallelujah. Not going to vote for him, but at least he'll stop the nonsense. He gave a speech at a black church. And he said, the Moses generation, referring to the generation of MLK, has gotten us 90% of the way there. I thought that was reasonable because 8% of Americans believe Elvis is still alive, so there's not a whole lot you can do about that. He said, my generation, the Joshua generation, has to get us an additional 10%. That's why he walked into the Oval Office with 70% approval. That's the person they thought they hired. The person that they got was the one who said the Cambridge police acted stupidly. You remember that? Cop showed up, just did his job. This man broke into his own house. Neighbor called 911, didn't know who he belonged to the house. White cop shows up very politely, says, "Sir, please come out, identify yourself. I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out." And this guy, by the way, Henry Louis Skip Gates, is a Harvard professor and a good friend of Obama's. Did Obama say, "Last night I had a conversation with my friend Henry Louis Skip Gates. I said, Skip, what are you doing? Cop's just doing his job." He showed up. You have an astute neighbor, called 911. Don't you want your neighbors to be proactive and do that? And instead of cooperating, you copped an attitude. That's what I told my friend Skip Gates last night. That's what Obama should have said. What he said was, the Cambridge police acted stupidly. And then we had, if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. George Zimmerman was found not guilty. It was an all-white jury, to be sure, but there was a black alternate, and the black alternate said I would have found him not guilty, too. And race never came up. But Obama made a racial thing out of it. He embraced Black Lives Matter. He had Al Sharpton to the White House over 70 times. His AG, Eric Holder, referred to voter ID as pernicious racism, even though most blacks support voter ID. The anti-cop rhetoric. Every single time Barack Obama had an opportunity to say something conciliatory, he went the other way. Why? Because he knows, and the Democrats know, if you get black people angry and thinking about social justice and equity, whatever that means, they will go in there like lemmings and pull that lever 95% for the Democratic Party. And when I get up there on the White House and use my podium, we're going to be talking about these things, honestly. Let me say something real quickly about the attack on our law enforcement officials, attack on the police. It is a lie that the police are systemically racist. It is a lie that the police are killing black people just because they're black. There is a Harvard economist named Roland Fryer. He is from the inner city, like I am, Baltimore. And he just knew that the police were killing black people just because they were black. So he did a study. And he said, the results were the most surprising of my professional career. Not only were the police not killing blacks just because they were black, the police were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. The police kill more unarmed whites every year than they kill unarmed blacks. I defy you to name an unarmed white. Nobody cares. Something happens on a subway with a black man who dies after a chokehold is administered. In comes Anderson Cooper, in comes CNN, in comes all these people. By the way, are you aware that 3 weeks before Daniel Penny, the Marine, put the chokehold on Jordan Neely, 3 weeks earlier, a homeless black man, Tulsa, Oklahoma, with a gun, walked up behind a white person, shot him in the back of the head, execution style, went somewhere else, walked up behind another white person, shot him in the head, execution style. I bet you don't even know about it, do you? Can you imagine what would happen if some white homeless guy went up to a couple of black people and popped him in the back of the head? In comes Anderson Cooper, in comes CNN. We're being manipulated. And it's got to stop. There's something called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. You cops know what I'm talking about. Cops are pulling back. They're not doing proactive policing. As a result, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of what one data scientist at Thomson Reuters referred to as excess deaths. These are people who otherwise would be alive if the police were doing their normal proactive policing. And almost all of these excess deaths are the very black people that the Democrats purport to care about. The final thing I want to say is this. We've got to have school choice. According to the National Report Card, that's the National Assessment of Educational Policy, you teachers know what I'm talking about, 85% of black 8th graders, these are 13-year-old kids, can neither do math nor read at grade level. I kid you not. And 50% can't even do basic reading, which means a large number of black kids in this country, 13 years old, are functionally illiterate. Yet the Democrats, joined at the hip with the teachers union, adamantly oppose school choice. We've got 13 public high schools in Baltimore, I kid you not, where 0% of the kids are math proficient. Another half dozen where only 1% are. That's half of all the public high schools in Baltimore, all in the inner city, where either 0% of the kids are math proficient or none are, or 1% are. 53 public schools in Chicago where 0% of the kids are math proficient. And you have the nerve to oppose school choice? My website is larryelder.com. My father, as you know, was a World War II Marine vet. My older brother, Kirk, my late older brother, Kirk, was in the Navy during the Vietnam era. My little brother, Dennis, was in the Army. He went to Vietnam. I'm the only one who didn't serve. I've never been proud of that. This is my opportunity to give back to my country, and this is why I'm doing this. Thank you so much for listening to me. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.